Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite-Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor, Board Director, and Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Strategy Consultant, helping members of the C-Suite and their teams reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. We are back with our July 4th series, A Real Conversation from the C-Suite, with my very special guest, Dr. Deena Brown. Hello, Dr. Deena.
Hello.
It's good to have you back. We're going to jump into this next conversation. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts about the landscape specific to DEI in the workplace from your perspective as a director of DEI. And now that even the word diversity seems to be falling out of favor, what do you see in terms of the work in corporate America, especially since a lot of corporate DEI teams have been disbanded internally? What does that mean? Are people still committed or not? What does it look like? Do we need to change our languaging? Help educate us a little bit.
I think yes, and there's not an or. There's an and to that. And so although there's like conversations and given what's in the media, we've had some action by SCOTUS and all those different things, there is that is there a shift in commitment? It depends on who you're talking to. I think sometimes the visibility shifts because organizations have to make a decision on whether or not they want to be a target or not. And so I think that some people are moving in a unique way to navigate and to mitigate that. Is the commitment still there? It depends on who you're talking to and who you're asking to, because there's some people that weren't committed anyway. And so when George Floyd happened in 2020, you had a lot of people that slapped the Black Lives Matter on there, put a Band-Aid on some situations that are systemic within the organization, and they threw money without accountability. Mm-hmm. But here's a truth to that. Do intentional accountability strategic DEI actions work? Yes, they do. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the challenge. So it's almost like you kind of stir a hornet or a bee's nest to do that. And it's like, well, what about me? And so some of the conversations and the rhetoric around that is what you hear. Interestingly enough, if you look on LinkedIn, you will see there's been an increase on DEI roles and jobs opening. Mm. And I found that interesting the other day when I was doing some research. I was like, wait a minute. You hear on one side, and then you hear on the other side. Now, what's happening is sometimes the minority is more vocal than the majority.
Yes.
And I think that we have one of those things, like the minority is extremely vocal and the majority is remaining silent. For what reason? I don't know. I can't speak for all. So what do we do in those cases? And do we need to change our languaging? Or do we need to change our focus? I think that we need to be very strategic about our actions. Mm-hmm. So what's that about strategic actions? Because some of it was just rhetoric in the first place. Mm-hmm. And stop using DEI as an acronym to actually speak to words. Mm-hmm. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. You have a problem with equity? You have a problem with inclusion? You have a problem with diversity by our sheer natures, and we all have different fingerprints. Diversity is embedded in the very foundation of who and what we are.
Yes.
People can wrap their minds and language around acronyms. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So one recommendation that I would have is use the words, speak the mm-hmm. terms, mm-hmm. speak truth to power of what we're talking about. Then you'll begin to see, and then we can begin to judge and benchmark on whether or not people are still committed to that.
I would agree with you. At the same time, diversity is now being seen as a 4-letter word.
By who?
By those who are, you know what? That goes back to your point about originally some were really committed and some were not.
By who?
Right.
So what we see now in the current climate that we have is really unmasking and pulling the Band-Aid off. Mm-hmm. Of the sores that have been festering in organizations and have been systemic to them in the first place. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things that people were throwing money. I'm throwing money without accountability, without metrics, without benchmarks, without you have an unconscious bias training. And there we go. Mm-hmm. We move on. And so dealing with the behaviors that are associated with breaking the systemic and embedded practices that are in the organization.
Let's camp out here for a minute. Let's unpack this, because there is enough, and I say this often, community, you've heard it before, so you're going to hear it again.
Mm-hmm.
There are a myriad of data points that support why it's good to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. Your bottom line goes up. Women on boards and at the upper levels, they have a different way of leading and helping become more inclusive, and all of the things that say this is good. I have gotten to the point of asking the very pointed questions. If you know the whys, help me understand what your why not. Is it because that the system is so ingrained in the way it is that you just rather not spend the time doing it? Is it because the policies have been around so long that you just rather not invest the time to update them? Is it because you've been fishing in the same pond for so long that you'd rather not fish in a new pond? So we get the why. What is your why not?
So I'll respond with a question that's a rhetorical question. How long did slavery last in America?
Well,
okay.
And that's a wrap.
I mean, so we want overnight solutions.
But it isn't really an overnight solution. But look at the focus that we had in the 60s. I mean, this is not an overnight solution, not by any stretch of imagination.
But again, how long ago? Think about how long ago. We talk about civil rights and we talk about the last living enslaved person of color. We are not talking 400 years ago.
This is true.
We're not talking, you see what I'm saying? So I am not saying that that is excuse and people are off the hook. But when we ask questions of why isn't this happening faster? Well, look how ingrained and embedded in the very fabric and the soil of this country. We're talking about systemic issues. And what we've been doing is painting over the bricks instead of knocking the bricks down and tearing up the foundation and putting up. So we've been putting structures over corrupted soil and cracked foundations. We've been doing that.
I love that analogy. And to your point that it's going to move as fast as possible, considering how long it took us to get here. How do you encourage the generations coming in the workforce today that, frankly, are not hearing all that?
Are we? I think that we're at a point that we are addressing symptoms of a situation instead of the root cause of the disease. And the current generation operates at a different speed.
They do. They really do.
So communication, faster, stronger. I mean, technology. Think about this. Our current generation, you talk about what was a rotary phone.
Right.
Yeah. TV, what are you talking about?
Right. Push button phones, right. All that.
Think about that. Or I cannot get Instacart. See, we live in a microwave generation right now.
We do.
But those who are extremely impacted by the rate of change were the ones that still use easy bake ovens and use ovens. You see what I mean? Like, so I think that how do we shift the language and the understandings? And when I'm doing this work and I'm working with teams and I'm, like coaching and speaking on this, I talk about ecosystems of belonging.
Yes. Now,
there is a multitude of factors that go in that equation. So we have an EQ that is often missing in presence, that emotional intelligence that's there, right? We also have, so you have your EQ, and this is an equation I've been building out and been doing some work around this. So I'm sharing it here on your on this podcast first time.
Take notes, community, so you can refer to it later. Go ahead.
So we have the EQ, which is emotional intelligence. We know how critical that is. Who am I? That sense of awareness that I have and how I relate, connect, and build relationships. And then we have the CQ, right? The cultural intelligence
Yes.
that
Yes.
extends beyond if you're Black, white, Puerto Rican, or Haitian.
Yes.
We're talking about regional, we're talking about generational, we're talking about a whole host of cultural understandings.
Yes.
Embedded, and this might be a new concept for some, embedded in that cultural, that CQ, is what I call your CA, which your cultural agility. Your
Yes.
ability to know and be aware and how to connect and how to take actions, agile actions from that awareness. So
Mm-hmm.
not just being aware, oh, I know cultural, I understand that you have differences. And so again, generational differences, there's these dimensions of diversity that we talk about. We talk about regional, we even talk about ethno diversity. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very different when we talk about, communities of culture around the globe, because we work in global environments. If you have high levels of EQ plus CQ, and what I'm calling your LQ, your leadership competencies, that will equate to what I've been evolving and developing, which is called a BQ, your belonging quotient.
Oh, that is so good.
My trademark. My belonging quotient is something.
I love that. So yeah, EQ, your emotional quotient, CQ, which is your cultural quotient and cultural agility, plus your LQ, your leadership quotient, equals your belonging quotient.
Mm-hmm. Will increase.
I
Yeah. So these are
love
levels
that.
that you, right. And
Yeah.
so if you have a deficiency in any one of those areas, your belonging quotient will
It's going to be
increase
more.
or
Yeah.
decrease based on those other factors that go in there.
Mm-hmm. I
And
love this.
that leads to that when we're talking about these generations, multi-generations in the workplace. And so when we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about how do we lead, how do we communicate this? Because as you can see from our college students who are protesting and leading
Mm-hmm.
this charge, they're very much connected from that space of that EQ space and that CQ space, but they lack the LQ.
Yes. 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 Because you have to live a little bit to help develop that LQ so that you've got an understanding of people, of interpersonal skills, of how to influence, of how to disagree without being disagreeable, and all of the other things that you're going to come in contact to in what we call the workplace system of systems.
They rather
Dr. Deena,
talk.
one quick question, and then we're going to pause this conversation here. So you said you're building this out. I have to ask, when are you going to have a book or some materials or something around this so that you can share with our community and the rest of the world?
Working on that. So this is to
Okay.
use, you remember the whole shift theorem of a
Yes. Yes.
movement that we've talked to. And so looking at what those factors, and I will definitely keep you posted. Happy to have conversations, happy to engage with organizations, people who want to kind of learn what that looks like, or even present opportunities to be a case study to take them through. And to look at what are some key assessments and opportunities. So definitely working with my research partner on that, but more to come.
Thank you, Dr. Deena. Ooh, I am excited to hear more about this. Community, now you see why whenever I see her from ear to ear, there's a grin, because I never leave without a basket full of nuggets of wisdom from her. So please make sure you come back for our next conversation with Dr. Deena. And at that time, we're going to be talking about how we can move forward in corporate America to respect every representation of diversity and focus on inclusion with intention. So you don't want to miss that. In the meantime, if you want to hear this podcast again, please go to the website, dranita.com, spell out the word doctor, and at the top of the landing page, click the link that says Keep It Real Podcast. While you're there, please feel free to check out my services and my resources. And please do me the favor of getting in the flow, follow, like, and overshare any conversation that helps you to reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. Please share them with your network. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.